Healing doesn't begin when the situation changes. Healing begins when you decide to let go. Let go of the anger. Let go of the resentment. Let go of the pain you keep reliving in your mind. Most people don't heal because they're still holding on to stories, memories, people, mistakes, and versions of themselves that no longer exist. But letting go is not forgetting. It's not pretending nothing happened. It's not saying it didn't hurt. Letting go is choosing peace over punishment. It's choosing freedom over attachment. It's choosing a future over a past you can't change. This audiobook will take you through the psychology of letting go, how the mind stores pain, why it holds on, and how to release what no longer serves your growth. Because the truth is simple. You don't heal by controlling the past. You heal by giving the present a chance. And when you learn the art of letting go, you don't just set yourself free. You transform your entire life. Chapter 1. Why we hold on to pain. The human mind is complex, but one of its most predictable tendencies is its attachment to painful experiences. We often believe we struggle to let go because the memories are too heavy, the emotions too deep, or the event too significant. But in truth, the mind clings to pain for psychological reasons that have little to do with strength or weakness. The brain clings to familiar emotional patterns, even painful ones. Familiarity, not comfort, is what the mind seeks. If a painful emotion has been repeated or reinforced over time, the brain begins to treat it as a known state, something it can predict. And what is predictable feels safer to the subconscious than what is unfamiliar, even if the familiar hurts. This is why letting go feels difficult. Pain becomes a mental home, a place the mind returns to because it knows how to navigate it. Unhappiness, sadness, resentment, or anger may feel heavy, but the brain often prefers them over emotional uncertainty. Letting go requires stepping into a new way of feeling. Unfamiliar territory the mind is initially reluctant to enter. Another subtle but powerful reason we hold on is the illusion of control. Holding on gives a false sense of control over the past. When you replay a hurtful memory, when you revisit what someone said, when you analyze what you could have done differently, your mind feels like it is still interacting with the event. It feels like it is doing something, trying to protect you, understand you, or prevent the pain from happening again. This gives the illusion that you are maintaining control, when in reality, you are simply reliving the wound and keeping it alive. The deeper the emotional impact, the more likely the pain becomes intertwined with identity. Pain becomes part of identity when not processed. For many people, hurt becomes a lens through which they see themselves. I was betrayed. I was abandoned. I was rejected. I was mistreated. These experiences, when not healed, can become internal labels that shape how you think about yourself and how you move through the world. The pain becomes a story you tell yourself so often that it starts to feel like who you are. When pain becomes identity, letting it go feels like losing a part of yourself, even if that part is hurting you. Another reason we hold on is the mind's habit of problem solving. The mind revisits hurt to solve what cannot be changed. The brain is designed to fix things. It replays painful moments because it believes that with enough analysis, you will eventually find an answer that makes the memory hurt less. But the past cannot be edited. The event cannot be undone. The conversation cannot be rewritten. The relationship cannot be redone. And so the mind loops, trying to solve an unsolvable equation, confusing thinking with healing. This endless revisiting traps you in emotional time, unable to move forward. But the most important truth is this. Awareness of these patterns is the starting point of healing. You cannot release what you do not understand. You cannot heal what you do not acknowledge. Recognizing why you hold on. The brain's attachment to familiarity, the illusion of control, the identity built around pain, and the mind's unsolvable search for answers is what opens the door to freedom. Healing begins with awareness, Because awareness gives you choice. Once you see the pattern clearly, you can interrupt it. You can choose processing over replaying, peace over reliving, and freedom over attachment. Letting go is not forgetting. It is not pretending the past didn't happen. It is not forcing yourself to move on before you're ready. Letting go is understanding deeply and honestly why the mind holds on in the first place. It is acknowledging that these patterns are natural but not permanent. And it is taking the first step toward emotional liberation by seeing the truth behind the pain. Healing begins with awareness. Awareness begins with understanding. And understanding begins here. Chapter 2. Understanding emotional wounds. Emotional wounds may not bleed, bruise, or leave visible marks, but they operate with the same seriousness as physical injuries. In fact, they often penetrate deeper because they affect not just the body, but the mind, identity, and sense of safety. Emotional wounds operate like physical ones. Unattended, they worsen. When you ignore emotional pain, suppress it, or pretend it doesn't exist, the wound doesn't disappear. It festers. It creates internal inflammation, anxiety, anger, numbness, fear, avoidance, or emotional shutdown. Just as a physical injury becomes infected when untreated, an emotional injury becomes psychological discomfort that shows up in behavior, relationships, and self-worth. Many emotional wounds originate early. Childhood experiences shape adult reactions and attachments. The way you were treated, spoken to, loved, ignored, supported, or criticized as a child becomes the blueprint your brain uses to interpret the world. If you were dismissed emotionally, you may grow into an adult who doubts whether your feelings matter. If you were abandoned or betrayed, you may fear closeness or crave validation intensely. If you grew up around chaos, your nervous system may still expect chaos, interpreting peaceful moments as unsafe. Childhood wounds don't stay in childhood. They travel with you until they are acknowledged and healed. These wounds often create invisible patterns in the mind. Trauma creates mental loops that replay subconsciously. Without understanding why, you may find yourself revisiting the same fears, attracting similar relationships, reacting strongly to small triggers, or repeating behaviors that feel illogical. Trauma doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through habits you can't explain. The mind replays old pain, not because you want to relive it, but because the subconscious is trying to protect you by predicting danger. These loops are survival mechanisms, but they keep you stuck in old emotional climates long after the storm has passed. The first step in breaking these cycles is clarity. Naming the wound brings clarity. Ignoring it brings chaos. Emotional pain thrives in silence and confusion. When it has no name, it controls you from the shadows. But when you articulate the wound, I felt abandoned, I was rejected, I was belittled, I was unprotected, I was unseen, the chaos begins to organize. Naming a wound does not make it worse. It makes it understandable. Clarity reduces emotional fog. It allows you to separate the wound from your identity and to understand your reactions with compassion instead of shame. True healing requires honesty. Healing begins with acknowledging that something hurt you. Many people minimize their pain. It wasn't that bad. Others had it worse. I should be over it. I don't want to think about it. But avoidance is not healing. It is emotional delay. You cannot release what you refuse to admit. Acknowledging your hurt is not weakness. It is the first act of strength. It is the moment you stop fighting your emotions and start understanding them. It is the moment you allow healing to enter. Emotional wounds are not signs of brokenness. They are signs of humanity. They are not your fault, but they are your responsibility to heal. Because when emotional wounds are understood, they lose their power. When they're named, they stop controlling your reactions. When they are acknowledged, they begin to soften. And when you finally face them with honesty, you open the door to freedom. Healing doesn't begin with forgetting. Healing begins with seeing clearly and courageously where the pain came from and how it still affects you. Understanding your emotional wounds is not about reliving the past. It is about reclaiming the parts of yourself that the pain once held. Chapter 3. The Psychology of Attachment. Humans are wired for attachment. It is a fundamental part of our emotional biology, the way our brain seeks safety, love, and belonging. From childhood onward, we learn to cling to the people, places, memories, and identities that give us a sense of stability. Humans attach to people, memories, and identities for safety. We hold on not just because we want to, but because our nervous system feels anchored by familiarity. Attachment is an emotional shelter. Even when the shelter is painful, the mind prefers the known over the unknown. Familiarity feels like safety, even when it limits our healing. But attachment, like all psychological mechanisms, has two sides. Attachment becomes unhealthy when it limits growth. When you cling to someone who no longer treats you well, to a past that no longer reflects your present, or to an outdated identity that no longer fits who you are becoming, attachment shifts from support to restriction. You stop expanding. You stay where you are because your mind fears that moving forward means losing something important. Unhealthy attachment creates emotional stagnation, a feeling of being stuck even when a part of you wants to move on. One of the core reasons attachment becomes so strong is the fear beneath it. The fear of loss often feels worse than the loss itself. Your mind anticipates the pain of letting go, and that anticipation becomes larger than reality. The fear of being alone, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of starting over, the fear of not knowing who you'll be without this attachment. These fears create emotional turbulence long before any separation happens. The mind catastrophizes loss, imagining worst-case scenarios, convincing you that holding on is safer, even when your heart knows it's not. But healing requires a different kind of strength. Letting go is the process of detaching with compassion. Letting go doesn't mean erasing memories, rejecting someone, or pretending that the past didn't matter. It means loosening your grip on what hurts you. It means acknowledging that you can love something and still outgrow it. It means gently releasing emotional dependence, understanding that compassion can coexist with separation. Letting go is not abandonment. It is liberation, both for you and for the parts of you that have been emotionally suffocated. To let go with compassion means you do not punish yourself for being attached. You simply give yourself permission to evolve. You thank the experience for what it taught you, and you allow yourself to step into a new chapter. Compassionate detachment is not cold, it is kind. It honors your emotional history without letting it define your emotional future. Ultimately, the key lesson of attachment is simple yet profound. Healthy attachment empowers. Unhealthy attachment traps. Healthy attachment feels like support, connection, warmth, and mutual growth. It allows you to be yourself without fear. It encourages expansion. It strengthens your identity. In healthy attachments, love coexists with freedom, not control. Unhealthy attachment, however, feels restrictive. It is rooted in fear, dependency, insecurity, and emotional fusion. It keeps you small. It makes you afraid to lose something that may already be gone emotionally. It convinces you that your worth depends on the attachment, which is never true. Recognizing the difference between healthy and unhealthy attachment is one of the greatest steps toward emotional freedom. It helps you understand why you cling, why you fear letting go, and why moving forward feels so heavy. It also shows you that letting go does not mean losing everything. It means gaining space to grow. Attachment is a natural human instinct, but healing comes from choosing which attachments help you rise and which ones keep you chained. When you understand the psychology behind your emotional ties, you begin to see that letting go is not the end. It is the beginning of reclaiming yourself. Letting go becomes easier when you realize that the real safety you seek does not come from holding on, but from learning to trust yourself as you step into what comes next. Chapter 4: Rumination, the mind's endless loop. Rumination is one of the most exhausting mental habits a person can experience. It pulls you into a cycle where your mind replays old pain, conversations, mistakes, and memories over and over again. Not to heal them, but to keep them alive. Rumination is the repetitive replay of old pain. It feels like the mind is stuck on a loop, returning to the same thought with the same intensity, long after the moment has passed. Instead of processing the experience, the mind circles around it, trying to make sense of something that has already ended. This happens because the brain is wired for problem solving. The brain thinks repetition equals resolution, but keeps you stuck. When something hurts deeply, a betrayal, a failure, a disappointing conversation, the brain assumes that thinking about it repeatedly will eventually produce clarity or closure. But emotional pain rarely resolves through thinking alone. Instead, the loop creates a false sense of control. If I keep thinking about this, maybe I can fix what happened. Yet rumination solves nothing. It only keeps the wound open. It pulls you backward into a moment that can't be changed, leaving no mental space to move forward. Over time, rumination becomes emotionally corrosive. Rumination fuels anxiety, shame, and self-blame. Anxiety grows because your mind becomes trapped in fearful what-ifs. Shame grows because the mind exaggerates mistakes and flaws. Self-blame grows because you repeatedly relive moments where you felt powerless, wrong, or hurt. The more you ruminate, the more distorted the memory becomes. You begin to feel responsible for things that weren't your fault. You relive emotions that should have faded. The pain becomes heavier, not lighter. Ruminating doesn't just replay the memory, it magnifies it. Breaking free from this loop requires intention. Breaking the loop requires interrupting thought patterns intentionally. The mind won't stop rumination on its own. You must intervene by redirecting your attention. This can be done through grounding techniques, shifting into physical movement, journaling, breath work, or consciously replacing the intrusive thought with a new one. The goal is not to force the thought away, but to interrupt the cycle long enough to regain control. Interruption creates a gap. A gap creates clarity. Clarity creates healing. And the most empowering truth is this: rumination is a habit, and habits can be changed. Rumination feels like a personality trait, but it isn't. It is a mental behavior your brain learned over time. That means it can unlearn it too. With repeated practice, you can train your mind to stop looping and start letting go. You can create new thought patterns, new emotional responses, and new cognitive habits that support healing instead of prolonging pain. Breaking the rumination cycle doesn't happen overnight, but each interruption weakens the loop. Each moment of awareness gives you back a bit of control. Each intentional shift rewires the brain away from repetition and toward resolution. Rumination is not who you are, it is something you've been doing. And once you understand the loop, you gain the power to step outside it and reclaim your peace. Chapter 5: How the Body Stores Emotional Pain. The mind and body are not separate. They're deeply connected, constantly communicating, constantly influencing one another. This is why emotional pain doesn't stay only in your thoughts. It settles into your physical being, shaping how you breathe, move, react, and even how you rest. Stress hormones imprint emotional memories in the body. When you experience rejection, fear, heartbreak, trauma, or prolonged stress, the body releases cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals prepare you for danger. But when the danger is emotional rather than physical, the tension doesn't get released. Instead, it becomes stored as muscle tightness, shallow breathing, and chronic stress patterns. Over time, unprocessed emotions show up as tension, fatigue, or anxiety. You may notice tight shoulders, a heavy chest, a stiff jaw, headaches, a clenched stomach, or restlessness. All signs that emotional energy is trapped in the body. Fatigue often appears not because you're physically tired, but because emotional suppression drains enormous amounts of energy. Anxiety is another expression of stored emotional pain. The body is bracing for something unresolved, something it hasn't fully understood or released. When the mind avoids feeling, the body carries the burden. This is why healing must involve the body as much as the mind. Emotional pain is not only a story you mentally replay. It is a physiological pattern your body holds, and the body needs a way to release it. Breath work and movement release stored emotional energy. Breath work can calm the nervous system instantly, telling the body that it no longer needs to hold tension. Deep breathing activates the parasympathetic system, the body's natural healing mode, releasing the pressure stored in muscles and organs. Movement, whether gentle stretching, walking, yoga, shaking, or any physical expression, helps the body process emotions that talking alone cannot release. When you move, you give the body permission to let go of energy that has been trapped for years. This reinforces a powerful truth. Emotional healing is both mental and physical. You cannot fully heal by thinking alone. You must release the emotional memory from the body as well. This is why simply getting over it doesn't work. The mind may try to forget, but the body remembers. Psychological wounds create physical imprints, and those imprints must be addressed through breath, movement, stillness, grounding, and physical awareness. Healing becomes much deeper when the body participates, because at the root of it all lies one undeniable fact. The body remembers until you teach it to let go. Your muscles remember tension. Your breath remembers fear. Your posture remembers heartbreak. Your nervous system remembers every moment you felt unsafe or overwhelmed. But the body can also learn new patterns. It can learn safety. It can learn ease. It can learn calm. It can learn freedom. Letting go is not just a mental choice. It is a physical process. It is the quiet release of old emotional weight stored in your muscles, your breath, your nervous system. When you teach the body to let go, gently, consistently, compassionately, the mind follows. And together, they create a new state of emotional balance where pain is no longer stored, but finally processed and released. Healing begins in the mind, but completes itself in the body. Chapter 6, Acceptance, the first step of true freedom. Acceptance is often misunderstood. Many people hear the word and immediately think it means approval, surrender, or weakness. But acceptance is none of those things. Acceptance is the moment you stop fighting reality and start seeing it clearly. Acceptance is clarity, not agreement. You don't have to like what happened. You don't have to approve of it. You don't have to think it was fair. Acceptance simply means acknowledging the truth without denial, distortion, or resistance. This matters because you cannot change what you refuse to accept. When you avoid, suppress, or argue with reality, you stay stuck in emotional limbo. You cling to should have, could have, and why me, instead of dealing with what is. Denial may feel comforting in the moment, but it prevents movement. Resistance may feel like strength, but it creates internal tension that keeps you trapped. The doorway to change opens only when you stop pretending and start acknowledging, gently, honestly, courageously, the truth of what happened and how it affected you. When you accept reality, something powerful happens. Acceptance transforms pain into information. Pain that hasn't been accepted feels personal and overwhelming, like an attack on your worth. But once you accept it, the pain becomes insight. It becomes context. It becomes data you can work with. Acceptance allows you to shift questions like, why did this happen to me? Into, what can I learn from this? Acceptance moves you from emotional paralysis into emotional understanding. It turns suffering into self-awareness and creates the clarity needed for healing. This shift brings another gift. It frees emotional energy for healing. Resistance drains energy. Fighting the past drains energy. Replaying what cannot be undone drains energy. When you stop resisting and begin accepting, you reclaim that emotional strength. You redirect it into rebuilding, restoring, and reassessing your life. Acceptance opens up mental space and emotional bandwidth. Suddenly, you can breathe. You can think more clearly. You can feel without drowning. The energy once trapped in denial becomes fuel for transformation. And it's important to understand, acceptance is not giving up, it's stepping forward. Giving up is passive. Acceptance is active. Giving up is defeat. Acceptance is empowerment. Giving up collapses your strength. Acceptance restores it. When you accept what happened, you take back your power. You say, I see reality clearly, and now I choose my response. You stop being chained to the past and start moving toward the future. Acceptance positions you to make new choices, set new boundaries, and create a life that is not defined by old wounds. True freedom begins the moment you stop resisting what is true. You release the struggle. You gain clarity. You create emotional space. You allow healing to flow. Acceptance does not erase pain. It liberates you from being controlled by it. It turns chaos into understanding. It turns hurt into wisdom. It turns the past into something you can walk away from, not something you carry. Acceptance is the first step because it is the step that makes all other healing possible. You don't heal by holding on. You heal by seeing clearly and stepping forward with truth, courage, and compassion. Chapter 7. The Art of Forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood forms of healing. Many people resist it because they believe it means excusing the hurt, forgetting the pain, or welcoming someone back into their life. But forgiveness is not an act of approval. It is an act of liberation. Forgiveness is not for them. It's for your peace. It is the moment you stop allowing someone else's actions to occupy space in your mind, your emotions, and your daily life. It is something you do for yourself, not for the person who hurt you. Pain becomes heavier the longer we carry it. Anger becomes a weight. Resentment becomes a mental cage. Bitterness becomes emotional poison. You may think holding on to anger protects you, but in reality, it keeps you tied to the very person or moment you are trying to escape. This is why forgiveness is powerful. You forgive to release the emotional hold someone has on you. When you forgive, you reclaim your mental and emotional energy. You take back your power. You stop letting the past dictate your present. But forgiveness is not instant. Forgiveness is a process, not a single moment. It doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't happen because you decided it should. It happens gradually, in layers, as you release the emotional charge tied to the memory. Some days you may feel free. Other days the wound may feel fresh again. This is normal. Forgiveness is not linear. It is cyclical. You revisit the hurt with more understanding each time, and slowly the emotional weight decreases. One day, the memory no longer triggers you. That is the moment forgiveness is complete, when the pain loses its power. A crucial truth to remember is that you can forgive without reconnecting or approving. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation, trust, closeness, conversation, agreement, pretending nothing happened. You do not owe anyone access to you just because you chose to forgive them. Forgiveness is an internal act. Reconnection is an external choice. They are not the same. You can release the emotional burden while still protecting yourself with distance, boundaries, or complete separation. Forgiveness also does not mean the behavior was acceptable. It means you refuse to carry the emotional consequences of that behavior any longer. You free yourself from the lingering grip of hurt. Because in the end, forgiveness frees you from resentment's prison. Resentment traps you. Forgiveness releases you. Resentment keeps the past alive. Forgiveness lets it rest. Resentment punishes you, not them. Forgiveness heals you, with or without them. When you hold on to resentment, your mind stays stuck in a loop of replaying what happened. Your heart stays hardened. Your body stays tense. Your emotions stay fragile. But when you forgive, even silently, something profound happens. You loosen the chains that bind you to your pain. You finally breathe fully again. You step out of the past and re-enter your own life. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. It restores inner peace, emotional freedom, and mental clarity. It allows you to stop being defined by the hurt and start defining yourself by your healing. It shifts the focus from what happened to what can happen next. It turns suffering into wisdom and resentment into release. Forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is strength. It is the decision to stop carrying a burden that was never meant to be permanent. In forgiving, you don't lose anything. You regain yourself. Chapter 8. Letting go of anger. Anger is one of the most powerful and misunderstood emotions we experience. It feels sharp, hot, immediate, but beneath that intensity lies something softer, something older, something deeper. Anger rarely appears on its own. Anger is often a mask for deeper wounds. It covers hurt, disappointment, betrayal, fear, rejection, or sadness. When the deeper wound feels too vulnerable to face, the mind shields itself with anger because anger feels stronger, safer, and more in control. But while anger protects you temporarily, holding on to it ultimately hurts you more than it helps. This is because holding anger drains mental energy. Anger is heavy. It occupies space in your mind, tightens your body, and narrows your ability to think clearly. When anger sits unprocessed, it becomes chronic. Instead of a momentary emotional response, it turns into bitterness, irritability, or emotional fatigue. You may feel on edge, mentally exhausted, or disconnected from yourself. Anger consumes your emotional bandwidth, leaving less space for peace, joy, clarity, and connection. But letting go of anger does not mean suppressing it. Suppression is just another form of holding on, storing it inside your body and mind. Healing requires expression. Express anger safely. Journaling, conversations, movement. Writing helps release the emotional pressure without hurting anyone. Speaking openly with someone you trust helps bring clarity. Movement, walking, exercise, stretching, or even shaking out tension helps release the physical buildup of emotional energy. Expression gives your anger somewhere to go. It transforms the emotion from something stuck inside you into something acknowledged and released. Anger needs motion, otherwise it becomes stagnation. Once anger is expressed in a healthy way, something powerful becomes possible. Replace anger with calm understanding. Understanding doesn't mean agreeing. Understanding doesn't mean approving. Understanding simply means seeing the deeper wound behind the anger, the unmet need, the crossed boundary, the disappointment, the fear, the betrayal. When you understand the real source of your anger, the emotion softens. You stop fighting the surface reaction and start healing the root. Calm understanding gives you clarity where anger gave you confusion. It gives you control where anger gave you reactivity. It gives you peace where anger kept you locked in tension. Because at the heart of emotional healing lies one simple truth. The moment anger ends, healing begins. Anger keeps you tied to the moment you were hurt. Letting go untangles you from that moment. The body relaxes. The mind quiets. The heart softens. Your emotional landscape opens up again. Letting go of anger is not about forgetting what happened. It's about freeing yourself from the emotional weight that's been sitting on your chest. It's about choosing peace over tension. It's about giving yourself permission to stop carrying a burden that no longer serves you. When anger fades, truth appears. When truth appears, healing becomes possible. And when healing begins, you finally reclaim your emotional freedom. Chapter 9. Letting go of regret. Regret is one of the most painful emotions because it ties your mind to a version of yourself that no longer exists. It is the emotional anchor that keeps you stuck in the past, replaying choices, moments, and decisions with a harshness you would never use on anyone else. Regret holds you hostage in the past. It traps your thoughts in what could have been, preventing you from stepping fully into what can still become. When regret takes over, life feels like a story you're constantly rewinding instead of one you're actively living. The heaviness of regret comes from an unfair expectation we place on ourselves. The expectation that we should have known better. But the truth is simple and freeing. You blame yourself for not knowing what you didn't know then. You judge your past self with the knowledge, wisdom, maturity, and clarity you gained after the experience. This is emotional time travel, punishing yourself for lacking insight you only developed because you lived through the mistake. Regret grows when compassion for your past self is missing. The path out of regret is not denial or self-forgiveness alone. It is transformation. Replace regret with responsibility. Learn and move on. Responsibility is not blame. It is ownership. It is the moment you say, yes, this happened. Yes, I made that choice. And yes, I can grow from it. Responsibility empowers you because it shifts your identity from someone who dwells in the past to someone who reshapes the future. You cannot rewrite yesterday, but you can influence every tomorrow. Responsibility turns regret into direction. To take responsibility, you must find meaning in what happened. Identify the lesson within the mistake. Every regret carries a message about boundaries, self-worth, emotional patterns, timing, intuition, or choices. The moment you extract the lesson, the mistake stops being a source of shame and becomes a source of wisdom. Lessons turn pain into growth. They turn regret into clarity. They turn emotional weight into emotional insight. Once you understand the lesson, the regret loses its power. It no longer defines you. It teaches you. And that is when something profound happens. Regret dissolves when growth becomes the focus. You cannot focus on both regret and growth at the same time. Regret looks backward. Growth looks forward. Regret asks, why did I do that? Growth asks, what can I do now? When growth becomes your priority, when you apply the lessons, change behaviors, reshape patterns, or make different decisions, regret transforms into gratitude for the experience that strengthened you. Regret says you should have been perfect. Growth says you're learning. Regret punishes the past. Growth empowers the future. Regret freezes you. Growth frees you. Letting go of regret is not about erasing the memory. It is about letting the memory reshape you instead of restrict you. It is about honoring who you were, understanding who you are, and choosing who you want to become. When growth becomes the focus, regret loses its voice, and your future finally becomes louder than your past. Chapter 10. Letting go of people. Letting go of people is one of the hardest emotional lessons we face, not because we are weak, but because we are wired for connection. We form bonds, build memories, and shape parts of our identity around the people we allow into our lives. But not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some relationships expire, not because of failure, but because of growth. As you evolve, your values, needs, boundaries, and emotional maturity shift. Sometimes the people who once fit your life no longer match the direction you are moving in. This doesn't mean something went wrong. It simply means life is unfolding as it should. The most painful truth is that you can outgrow people you deeply care about. Emotional growth often requires distance from those who no longer support that growth. Loyalty to the wrong person drains your potential. You can love someone and still feel held back by them. You can care about someone and still recognize that your paths are diverging. Staying loyal out of guilt, history, or habit can suffocate your progress. The wrong relationships keep you emotionally stuck in self-doubt, in stagnation, or in cycles that repeat the same pain again and again. Letting go becomes an act of self-respect. But letting go doesn't need to turn into resentment. Letting go doesn't mean bitterness. It means boundaries. You don't have to hate someone to move on. You don't need to erase the past to create a future. Letting go is simply choosing peace over attachment, clarity over chaos, and growth over comfort. It means understanding that your emotional well-being matters more than maintaining a connection that no longer supports your life. Boundaries protect your heart, energy, and purpose, and setting them is an act of honesty, not hostility. Letting go becomes much easier when you release the emotional tension around it. Wish them well and move forward. You don't need closure from them. You don't need apologies. You don't need validation. You don't need to prove anything. Wishing someone well is not weakness. It is emotional maturity. It allows you to release the relationship gently, without carrying bitterness into your future. The past remains a chapter, not an anchor. You keep the lessons, the memories, the growth, but you stop carrying the emotional weight. Letting someone go with goodwill sets both of you free. And the deepest acceptance comes from understanding a simple truth. Not everyone is meant to stay, and that's okay. Life is a journey of continuous evolution. Some people are meant to teach you, some are meant to challenge you, some are meant to support you, and some are meant to walk with you only for a season. Their role in your story may change, but that doesn't make their presence meaningless. It simply means their part of your journey is complete. Letting go of people is not abandonment. It is alignment. It is choosing the version of yourself you are becoming over the version of yourself you used to be. It is trusting that releasing the wrong connections makes space for the right ones. It is knowing that love can exist without attachment and that memories can stay without holding you back. You don't lose anything by letting go. You simply make room for peace, clarity, and the relationships that are meant for your future. Chapter 11. Letting go of your old self. Letting go is not only about people or memories. Sometimes the hardest thing to release is the older version of yourself. The self you built in the past was shaped by survival, by experiences, by what you knew at the time. But as you grow, the identity that once protected you can begin to limit you. Old identities keep you stuck in outdated behaviors. If you keep seeing yourself as who you used to be, you keep behaving as who you used to be. The mind clings to familiar roles, the quiet one, the people pleaser, the overthinker, the scared version, the version that's settled. Not because they are healthy, but because they are known. But healing and progression require a transformation that begins from within. Reinvention requires releasing the version of you that's settled. The old self may have accepted less than it deserved, stayed in places too long, feared change, avoided boundaries, or lived through wounds that shaped its decisions. That version of you is doing its best with the tools it had. You don't need to resent your old self. You need to outgrow it. Clinging to that older identity keeps you repeating patterns that no longer match who you're becoming. Reinvention means gently letting go of the parts of you that were built on fear, scarcity, insecurity, or survival. It's natural to question who you are without the past, but the truth is empowering. The past self is not the final self. You are not frozen in the identity you created at 15, 20, or even last year. Humans evolve emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and mentally. Life experiences sharpen your understanding of yourself. New awareness builds new identities. You are a work in progress, not a completed story. The person you were taught you something. The person you are becoming will build something. For this evolution to occur, you must step out of your comfort zone. Growth begins where comfort ends. The familiar patterns feel safe, but they limit you. Growth often feels uncomfortable because it pulls you away from the emotional autopilot you've lived with for years. It requires new beliefs, new reactions, new habits, and new levels of self-respect. It asks you to step into a version of yourself that the old self never imagined. Discomfort isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you are expanding beyond your old identity. And through this process comes a powerful realization. You are allowed to evolve into someone new. You're allowed to outgrow who you were. You are allowed to change your mind, your habits, your priorities, your environment, and your identity. You are allowed to become more confident, more peaceful, more self-assured, more boundary strong, more aligned. Evolution is your right, not something you need permission for. You don't have to justify your growth to anyone. You don't have to remain consistent with a past that no longer feels true. You don't have to stay loyal to an older version of yourself that was built from pain or fear. Letting go of your old self means releasing the versions of you that played small, tolerated too much, doubted too deeply, or lived in survival mode. It is an act of self-compassion, an acknowledgement that you deserve to heal into the person you are meant to be. You are not betraying your past. You are honoring your future. Letting go of who you were is the doorway to becoming who you are destined to be. Chapter 12. The Power of Present Moment Living. The present moment is the only place where life truly happens. Yet the human mind spends most of its energy wandering into the past, replaying pain, analyzing what went wrong, reliving old wounds, or escaping into the future, imagining worst-case scenarios and worrying about what might come. Healing requires neither. Healing requires presence. The present is where healing happens, not the past. You cannot undo what hurt you, and you cannot rewrite what has already happened. But you can choose how you relate to it right here, right now. The present moment is the only space where you can breathe, release tension, make new choices, and begin to shift your emotional reality. The mind struggles to let go when it is constantly revisiting old stories. The mind can only let go when it stops reliving pain. Every time you replay the memory, the brain responds as if the pain is happening again. The body tenses, the heart races, and emotional wounds reopen. This repeated mental looping prevents healing because the mind is stuck in yesterday. When you gently bring your attention back to the present moment, you interrupt the cycle. You signal to the brain, this moment is safe. This moment is new. This moment is different. Letting go is impossible when you're mentally living inside the wound. Presence is what breaks the pattern. Living in the present is not just a spiritual idea. It is a psychological tool. Presence builds calm and clarity. When your attention is anchored in the now, anxiety decreases. Clarity increases. Emotion stabilizes. The mind quiets. You become more aware of your breath, your body, your surroundings, and your choices. Presence gives you the pause you need to break habits, reinterpret experiences, and choose responses instead of reacting automatically. It creates mental space, and space is where healing grows. However, presence is not something that happens effortlessly. The mind must be guided. This is where simple grounding practices become powerful. Grounding techniques bring you back to the now. These techniques reconnect you with your senses and pull you out of mental noise. Noticing your breath, feeling your feet on the ground, observing your surroundings, touching an object with attention, listening to sounds around you, placing a hand over your heart, taking slow, deliberate breaths. Grounding informs the nervous system that the past is no longer happening. It shifts you from the mental world to the physical world. It pulls you away from rumination and back into the present, where healing becomes possible again. The beauty of the present moment is this. Freedom lives in the moment you choose to return to. You can come back at any time. After a painful memory resurfaces, after anxiety spirals, after regret tightens your chest, after emotional overwhelm hits, after your mind wanders into old wounds. Every return to the present is a tiny act of liberation. Each time you bring yourself back, you weaken the hold the past has on you. You strengthen your ability to choose peace, clarity, and groundedness over emotional turbulence. You start realizing that the power to let go exists right here, not in some future moment, not after everything is resolved, but in the present breath you take. The present is not empty or simple. It is powerful. It is where you rebuild yourself. It is where the mind settles, the heart softens, and the body relaxes. It is where you stop carrying what you no longer need. It is where you find yourself again. Healing does not happen by rewinding the past. Healing happens by returning to the moment you're living in now. This moment, the one you can breathe into, feel, and influence, is where freedom begins. Chapter 13. Relearning Trust. Trust is one of the most delicate elements of emotional life. When it is broken, something inside you tightens, not just toward others, but toward yourself. Pain makes you cautious. Betrayal makes you guarded. Disappointment makes you doubt your own judgment. But the loss of trust doesn't have to be the end of connection. It can be the beginning of a deeper, wiser version of it. Hurt breaks trust. Healing rebuilds it. Trust is not destroyed permanently. It fractures, but with time, reflection, boundaries, and courage, it can be rebuilt from the inside out. The rebuilding begins within. Trust begins with trusting yourself first. Before you can trust others again, you must restore faith in your own intuition and decisions. After hurt, many people question themselves. Why didn't I see it coming? How could I let that happen? Can I trust my judgment ever again? But healing requires turning inward, not in blame, but in reassurance. Trusting yourself means believing you can recognize red flags, set boundaries, walk away when needed, and protect your own well-being. When you trust yourself, the fear of trusting others weakens because you know you won't abandon yourself again. One of the reasons trust feels impossible after hurt is the mind's desire for certainty. But the truth is freeing. You don't need guarantees. You need boundaries. There will never be absolute guarantees that someone won't disappoint you. Humans are imperfect, but boundaries create safety where guarantees cannot. Boundaries say, I expect respect. I will not tolerate mistreatment. If you cross this line, I will take action. Boundaries give you control over your own emotional environment. They allow you to open up cautiously instead of closing off completely. You don't need to predict the future. You just need standards that protect your heart. Trust can only grow through action. Trust grows with consistent, respectful behavior. Words mean little without follow-through. Promises mean little without patterns. Apologies mean little without change. Whether rebuilding trust with someone else or rebuilding it within yourself, the key is repeated, steady proof, not dramatic gestures. Trust is earned in small, consistent moments. Honesty, reliability, transparency, kindness, accountability. These actions gradually reassure the nervous system that safety is possible again. Trust is built in steps, not leaps. Relearning trust requires patience. Rebuilding trust is a slow, steady process of courage. Courage to open up again. Courage to let someone in. Courage to believe in yourself. Courage to move forward without fear controlling you. Courage to recognize that you deserve relationships that honor your heart. Trust does not return all at once. It returns quietly, through tiny choices, small risks, simple acts of faith. Each time you allow a new experience to unfold, each time you notice kindness instead of danger, each time you honor your boundaries, trust strengthens. The process is slow, but it is powerful. Relearning trust is not about reverting to who you were before the hurt. It's about becoming someone wiser, stronger, more self-respecting, and more emotionally grounded. It's about holding your heart gently while also opening it when the moment is right. Trust rebuilt is often stronger than trust untested because it is built with intention, awareness, and courage. You don't have to rush the process. You don't have to trust everyone. You don't have to pretend the hurt didn't happen. You only need to take one step at a time, back into yourself, back into strength, and eventually back into connection. Trust fractured is not trust lost. You can learn to trust again, and the rebuilding begins with you. Chapter 14. Closure. Why you don't need it from others. Closure is something nearly everyone longs for after emotional pain. A final conversation, an apology, an explanation, a moment that makes everything make sense. But life doesn't always give that. People disappear without answers. Wounds remain open, and situations end without neat conclusions. Healing cannot depend on someone else's ability to give you what they may never offer. Closure is often self-created, not given. True closure comes from within, from understanding, acceptance, and choosing to move forward even when the story feels unfinished. The idea that someone else will bring emotional peace keeps many people waiting in place. Waiting for someone else's explanation keeps you stuck. You wait for them to apologize, to admit what they did, to acknowledge your pain, to tell you why they left, to give you the truth they withheld. But waiting puts your healing under someone else's control. And sometimes the person who hurt you is not capable of giving closure. Not because you don't deserve it, but because they lack the self-awareness, courage, maturity, or emotional honesty required to offer it. If you wait for validation, you stay tied to the wound. If you wait for understanding, you keep reliving the moment. Healing begins the moment you decide you don't need someone else's words to free yourself. This is the heart of emotional maturity. You can close your chapter through understanding, not permission. Understanding doesn't come from them. It comes from you. You understand that people act from their wounds, limitations, fears, and patterns. You understand that their behavior says more about them than about your worth. You understand that the situation ended because it needed to. You understand that the story is complete, even if the explanation was incomplete. Understanding gives you the clarity the other person couldn't. It allows you to move forward without bitterness or confusion. It lets you rewrite the narrative from a place of empowerment rather than pain. Closure can be summed up in one grounding truth. Closure is clarity. This happened. I learned. I'm moving on. It doesn't need to be poetic or perfect. It doesn't require emotional fireworks. Closure is simply the moment you stop fighting the past and start choosing the future. It's the moment you stop needing answers that won't change what happened. It's the moment you release the grip the memory has on your daily life. It's the moment you take ownership of your healing. Closure comes from accepting reality, extracting the lesson, and letting the chapter end, even if the ending is silent. The most transformative shift is this. Give yourself the closure you've been waiting for. Write the letter you never sent. Say the words you never received. Recognize the hurt you carried. Acknowledge the truth you avoided. Release the emotional weight that isn't yours to hold anymore. Give yourself the goodbye you never got. Give yourself the understanding they couldn't offer. Give yourself the permission to move on without permission. Closure doesn't come when someone else decides the story is over. It comes the moment you decide you're ready to walk forward. You don't need their words, their explanation, or their apology. You only need your own clarity, your own courage, and your own choice. The closure you're seeking has been within you the entire time. Chapter 15. Building a future after letting go. Letting go isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new one. When the emotional weight you've carried for years finally starts to lift, something remarkable happens. You rediscover parts of yourself that were buried underneath the pain. The world begins to look different, lighter, more possible. A healed mind creates a new identity. Healing doesn't just remove pain, it reshapes who you are. You think differently, respond differently, choose differently. You begin to see yourself not as the wounded version who survived the past, but as the empowered version who is ready to create a future with clarity and intention. As emotional burdens fade, space opens up inside you. Freedom allows you to dream again. When you're deep in hurt, heartbreak, regret, or resentment, it's hard to imagine a future. Pain narrows your vision. It makes you think small, act cautiously, or avoid possibilities altogether. But once you release what was weighing you down, your mind becomes expansive. You start imagining again. New paths, new relationships, new experiences, new versions of yourself. Freedom replaces fear. Hope replaces heaviness. Possibility replaces limitation. But dreaming alone isn't enough. Healing gives you a new sense of self, and that self needs direction. Set goals aligned with your healed self. These goals should reflect who you're becoming, not who you were when you were hurting. Let your healed self, the stronger, wiser, calmer, more grounded version of you, guide your choices. Set goals that honor your worth, your boundaries, your growth, and your vision. Goals rooted in healing are sustainable because they come from authenticity, not from pain or pressure. Healing also changes how you relate to people. You become more intentional about who you allow into your life. Surround yourself with people who support your growth. Healing shows you the kind of relationships you truly deserve. Connections that feel safe, respectful, and uplifting. You begin to recognize red flags quickly. You choose people who listen, who encourage you, who celebrate your evolution. Your circle becomes a reflection of your healed energy, not your wounded past. The right people make your future feel spacious, not suffocating. And as you walk forward, something profound becomes clear. Your future expands as your emotional baggage disappears. Every piece of pain you release opens more space for joy. Every wound you heal opens more space for connection. Every identity you shed opens more space for reinvention. Every past chapter you close opens more space for new beginnings. Letting go doesn't erase your story, it upgrades it. It gives you the freedom to rewrite your life from a place of clarity instead of survival. Healing shifts you from replaying the past to designing the future. You begin to recognize that you are not defined by what hurt you, but by how you rise after it. Your new future isn't built from fear, but from wisdom. Not from wounds, but from strength. Not from survival, but from expansion. Letting go was the turning point. Healing was the transformation. Now the future is the creation, and it is yours, open, wide, and waiting for you to step into it. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing. You've learned why the mind holds on, how emotional wounds form, and how to loosen the grip of memories, people, and versions of yourself that no longer serve your life. Letting go is not a moment. It's a practice, a daily choice to stop carrying what hurts you and start choosing what heals you. Move gently, move consciously, move with compassion for yourself. Let go of the past that weighs you down. Let go of the anger that poisons your peace. Let go of the regret that steals your future. And step into the life that's waiting for you on the other side of release. Because freedom doesn't come from holding tighter. It comes from finally letting go.